Warhammer 40k Boltgun is good. Really good. Perfect? No. But it's really good, and I hope by the end of this video you'll agree with that sentiment. Warhammer 40k Boltgun was developed by Auroch Digital and published by Focus Entertainment, which has a history of publishing other Warhammer 40k games. Boltgun was officially released on May 23rd, 2023, which makes it the most modern game that I've played in a very long time. I think the last time I played a brand new game was Dark Souls 3 all the way back in 2016. Yeah, my god, does time have a way of slipping through your fingers. Warhammer 40k Boltgun, believe it or not, is set in the Warhammer 40k universe. Now me, I don't know much about the Warhammer 40k universe. I just saw the cover art and I was like, that looks sick, so I just dove right in. Kudos to whoever did the artwork. It's sweet. Now while I didn't know much about Warhammer 40k going in, I'm definitely more interested now. Maybe I'll read Horus Heresy. Who knows? Probably not, because reading, that takes away from playing Warhammer 40k Boltgun. So let's dive right into some gameplay specifics. Warhammer 40k Boltgun was heavily marketed as a boomer shooter, and I've heard some contention on whether or not it's truly a boomer shooter, but I see the pixelated graphics, and I see the extremely fast-paced gameplay, and you know what? I think boomer shooter personally. When I say extremely fast gameplay, I mean it. I mean, despite weighing like 600 kilograms, you're just flying through the arenas non-stop. And flying around is completely necessary in this game, because the second you stop sprinting, you're going to be getting stabbed, you're going to be getting shot, you're going to be having a terrible time. While you're flying around the map like a 500, 600, 700 pound armored gazelle, you're also going to be taking on dozens of enemies at once, and each enemy has a power level, and each weapon has a power level. So expect plenty of weapon switching while you're playing. You're weapon switching quite a bit, but not as much as something like, say, Doom Eternal. And it's pretty obvious. Just use your smaller weapons on the smaller enemies, and your bigger weapons on the bigger enemies. You do this a few thousand times and you beat the game. It's that easy. At its core, what this game does best is make you feel like a complete beast. You're a space marine, and it feels like it. With each step you take, you hear the heavy clanking of your boots hitting the ground. And you shoot a standard enemy just a couple times with the bolt gun, they explode into a fine red mist. And then after you've blown them all to hell, you can hit T on your keyboard and you taunt them. It's awesome. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is probably the closest we'll get to battling thousands of foes as a space marine, unless the US Space Force gets some serious funding in the next couple years. The gameplay loop is a lot like a cross between 90s shooters like Duke Nukem 3D and Doom, but it also has elements of more modern arena shooters such as, well, the new Doom games. Basically what I'm trying to say is that you'll spend a lot of time fighting your way through corridors in the search for red, yellow, and purple keys. And then there's also sections where it's an arena and it opens up a lot, and you'll have to take out a certain amount of enemies before you can continue on. It's pretty violent. Yeah, there's a lot of fighting in this game. It's kind of violent. The arena sections of the game happen generally 1 to 3 times per level, and I gotta say that the quality does vary quite a bit. Some arenas are really fun and they rival Doom 2016 in their intensity. Other arenas though kind of have me tearing out my hair a little bit. For instance, I found that in some arenas, the enemies would easily get stuck or lost and I wouldn't be able to find them, and then I wouldn't be able to continue because I couldn't find the enemies. And that interrupts my Space Marine LARPing, and we don't want that. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is actually a pretty long game. I went into it expecting a quick little dopamine snack and left with a 3-course dopamine meal. The game took me about 8 hours to complete, but I could totally see the game taking longer if you search for secrets more than I did. There are 3 chapters in the game, with each taking about as long as the other to complete, and while they last about the same amount of time, they do feel a little bit different. The first chapter takes place in snowy mountains, the second chapter takes place in a dusty, dry canyon, something straight out of Gunman Chronicles, and then the third chapter takes place on a space station, like Gunman Chronicles. By the way, it's important to note that while each chapter does escalate in pace, chapter 1's kind of slower, chapter 3 is insanity. While they do escalate in pace, each chapter starts you off with just one gun, and that's the bolt gun. You lose all your weapons at the beginning of each chapter. You actually don't get a full arsenal until midway through the third chapter, which means that you're gonna have to practice some patience before you can delight in crushing your enemies, seeing them driven before you, and hearing the lamentations of the women. Something like that. I think somebody said that. There are 9 unique weapons in Warhammer 40k Boltgun. There's the chainsword, the Boltgun, the shotgun, the plasma gun, the heavy bolter, the Volkite caliber, the grav cannon, the melt-the-gun, and the vengeance launcher. As you can expect, each weapon kind of fulfills its own niche role, so something like the bolt gun is better at taking out smaller enemies, both because it's fully automatic, but also because it has a ton of ammo lying around, whereas something like the grav cannon, it does massive damage, but the ammo is quite rare, so you should only really use it for large enemies. It's generally common sense which weapon you should use at what time. The weapons all feel great for the most part, in how they look and how they feel. I found myself using the bolt gun, the heavy bolter, the melt-the-gun, and the grav cannon a lot throughout the game because they're just so powerful. Now on the other hand, there are some weapons that I really didn't find myself using too much. The chainsword, I just found it didn't do enough damage against large enemies to be utilized throughout the game all that often. The vengeance launcher just does way less damage than you'd expect, and the Volkite caliber is largely replaceable by either the heavy bolter or the grav cannon, depending on what situation you're in. But yeah, the shotgun's alright. It's not amazing. It's just okay. There are 3 different grenades in the game as well. There's the crack grenade, the frag grenade, and the vortex grenade, and these are fantastic. You find the crack grenade and the frag grenades everywhere, so make sure to use them a lot because they do a ton of damage against smaller enemies, and the vortex grenade is like an instant win button. You just destroy bosses with it. The weapons can all be temporarily upgraded through finding secrets. For instance, there are ammunition pickups, special ammunition pickups for the bolt gun that increase its power. You only get 1 magazine though, so once it's gone, but it really helps with taking out the larger enemies and the mini bosses. There are also machine spirit upgrades, where you pick up a machine spirit and it upgrades the weapon you currently have equipped, and I absolutely love these upgrades. Regardless of which weapon you decide to upgrade, it's gonna make the weapon a lot better. It's very noticeable. But I found myself upgrading the bolt gun just about 80% of the time because it's just such a good, versatile weapon. There's a decent variety of weapons and there's a decent variety of enemies as well. You've got straight cannon fodder enemies, then you got medium ones, large ones, mini bosses, and bosses. First off, let me say that I love the design of the enemies. Certain creatures you're fighting, like the pink and blue horrors, I think they really stand out and look very unique to the game. And I also love the mini boss designs of the Lords of Change and Great Unclean Ones. My god, are the mini bosses beyond headaches. They're straight up migraines. Not that they're unfair or anything, they just do a ton of damage, and the whole time they're spawning in like 50,000 enemies to fight you. The mini bosses are tough, but they leave a lasting impression. I mean, not just because of the difficulty, but because of how cool they look. I will admit, some enemies are pretty annoying. The Nurglings and the Plague Toads, I think they are the cream of the crop in terms of annoyance. Nothing screams fun like just small little enemies that just sprint straight at you. In fact, running straight at you is what quite a few enemies do in this game. It's either run straight at you or just stand still and shoot at you from one stationary position. The AI, it could have been a bit more advanced, but I mean, hey, this is supposed to be a boomer shooter, right? I mean, the AI in Doom wasn't that good. Actually, it was really good. What am I talking about? Now let's talk difficulty for a little bit. This game is supposed to be a boomer shooter, but it's not nearly as challenging as a lot of actual boomer shooters. I mean, I struggle with Doom 2 and Quake way more than with Boltgun. There's still a hefty challenge though, and you will probably die if you don't spend enough time looking for health and armor like you should. I mean, don't be surprised when a Chaos Marine just domes you out of nowhere. I played this game on medium difficulty because I see the harder difficulties and I get these flashbacks to my childhood of playing Quake 3 on Nightmare difficulty. Kids, do not play Quake 3 on Nightmare difficulty if you want to stay out of an insane asylum. There are 4 difficulties you can choose from. There's easy, medium, hard, and exterminatus. Ooh. I would recommend playing on medium, at least medium, for your first playthrough, because I found it was like a nice Goldilocks difficulty. It wasn't so easy that it was boring, but it wasn't so hard that it was frustrating. Fair warning to those going into the game, the segments of the game where you're kind of searching for keys, just fighting your way through corridors, they're really not too terrible. But the arena sections can be a royal pain in the tuchus. be prepared for those sections. Especially towards the late game, the arena sections are absolute insanity. This may sound like a random nitpick, but I found that it was really hard to know when I was taking damage. The damage indicators are blue instead of red, and the screen doesn't really shake or anything when you take a lot of damage. You gotta kind of keep your eyes glued on the health bar, because at one moment you'll be at 200 health, the next moment you'll be at 20 health. And the majority of my deaths came from just not knowing how much damage I was taking from each enemy. Oh my god, I just remembered that there's a plot in this game. And in true boomer shooter fashion, it doesn't really matter. It's very much secondary to the gameplay, with the only story being told in these expository cutscenes that happen at the beginning and end of each chapter. Essentially, you're a space marine sent to the planet of Graia to investigate some possible chaos activity. But on your way to the planet, your dropship gets shot down and the rest of your team dies. You're left with only your chainsword, and you have to fight your way across the planet, taking out various chaos sorcerers. Eventually you end up on a space station and take out the head chaos sorcerer, which cuts off the influx of chaos onto Graia. Now, while you cut off the influx, there still remains chaos on the planet, which leaves the story on kind of a cliffhanger at the end. Now, me, again, I never really got into Warhammer 40k. It just never happened. So I found the plot kind of confusing, and I could definitely see the plot being confusing to people who haven't played any Warhammer 40k games before as well. Finally, I'd like to talk about just some random things in this game. First off, the aiming felt a little strange to me in this game. It felt a little bit clunky. I tried adjusting my sensitivity and it never really seemed to click with me. Now, I don't know if this was intentional because you're a big clunky space marine, or if I'm just losing my mind and the aiming is totally normal. I'm probably just losing my mind, I'll be honest. Now, while the aiming felt a little strange, the controls overall were actually great. They were very intuitive, and I never found myself struggling to remember what does what on the keyboard. The music and art style are also great. Now, I gotta admit that I did not have the music on when I played this game because I was getting footage for this video and I had to keep the music off. But I've listened to it in my free time to figure out what it sounds like, and I think it's awesome. It's very high energy, it's great for pumping you up to purge some heretics. The art style really brings me back to the days of the build engine with games like Duke Nukem 3D or Shadow Warrior. It really takes me back to those days with just how everything looks and moves around. I just love it. It's got a great nostalgic feel, despite the fact that Boltgun was released in 2023. By the way, Boltgun, very cheap game. It's awesome. It's only a little over 20 bucks on Steam when not on sale. It's about 20 bucks for a game that worked on launch, has no microtransactions, and has a campaign that lasts longer than most AAA games. That's kind of a steal. It's not really a steal because it's 20 bucks, but it's a really good deal. In conclusion, Warhammer 40k Boltgun is good. It's really, really good, actually. There are some minor flaws in the game, but there's also major fun to be had. It's rare that a game that is so polished is released for only 20 bucks. So if you're looking for some fast-paced action, definitely check out Warhammer 40k Boltgun, and especially if you're a Warhammer 40k fan, you'll love the game. But that's about all for today. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a little while since I posted my last video, but thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Hey, you, don't be a fool. Did you know that a salty Bendro will show that you are super cool? Hey, you, a like will show you rule. It's totally free and guarantee your help will be my fuel.